we brought some slides, which I hope we're going to see in a second. Exactly, because we thought that we're going to start with a couple of slides today, and then we extend the panel, welcoming Lauri and Tiago in a second. But maybe first to kick it off, look, this term, the agentic state, that came up, I think, now quite a lot of times already today. But Luukas, what I would like to understand better from you, how does this relate to rethinking government? What's the nexus between agentic AI and government?
Thank you. So, of course, we should start by defining our terms. I think everyone here knows what agentic AI is, but to really simplify it, it's a combination of two parallel streams in technology converging. The first is what we call the brain. What algorithms can do, in particular, the massive development in capabilities we've had from large language models and generative AI in the last 3 and 4 years, but also before that, deep learning and other kinds of learning models that are being developed right now that can do analysis, that can generate content, that can predict things. But then combining that with digital tools, with APIs, with the applications that we've all been building for the last 2 decades. And when we put the brain of LLMs and generative AI together with the tools, the digital tools we have, we create software that can perceive, reason, and act in the virtual and in the real physical world with relatively little human intervention beyond setting goals and defining parameters. And why this is valuable when we turn to government is that government today, well, it needs agentic AI. I mean, what is government? Let's break it down. Today, it's a bundle of workflows. Benefit claims, procurements, HR, licensing, rulemaking, all the things that we do, the processes that today are slow, reactive, episodic, and that move at the speed of bureaucracy, that look like forms and audits, annual updates, review processes. And so the capability that agentic AI brings to basically bring a whole bunch of machine coworkers next to our human coworkers and a whole lot more intelligence, but also action to the table, is really, really critical if governments want to speed up how they work and meet the demands of the 21st century.
Great. So, look, that thought about governments or a bundle of workflows. That's I think, it's an exciting thought. That's novel. But I think we have something more exciting to show today, which is the following. Look, so today we launched, and I'm incredibly proud that we can do this today here, the Agentic State Vision Paper. So right now, this is, I would call it, the most comprehensive public resource about how governments can make best use of agentic AI. We've done this with a group of authors. Luukas, you authored it. I had the pleasure of authoring it together with 3 further co-authors, and 21 digital government leaders around the world, from 15 different countries, ranging from Estonia, Ukraine, Singapore, Australia, UK, Germany, Brazil, a couple of further, to really pick the best brains together to have a good understanding of what agentic AI can do for government. So feel free to scan the QR code. Feel free to visit the website. The paper is now online. And look, I just wanted to pick one central thought in the paper, because I think that's really central, and you can build on this in a second, which is, I think governments are really focused on doing the right things, doing things correctly, focusing on the process.
The workflows.
The workflows, exactly. So this is where we're coming from. And I think the big shift that we're going to see with agentic AI is that we can move from doing things right, doing things correctly, to doing the right things. And this idea of doing the right things, this outcome-driven idea, that's really central to what we can do with agents, and how this may look in reality is something that you will now show us.
That's right. I think basically it comes down at a high level to what are the KPIs that we actually expect from our governments. And so the numbers you see here, they're not hypothetical. These are numerical targets that some of the more advanced governments today are trying to hit in the next couple of years by using agents in government. So really taking the entire gamut of public services and automating those end-to-end so that you can complete any service interaction in less than a minute. But it's not just about speeding up your existing services. It's about making government more dynamic in how it reacts to unforeseen circumstances, pandemics, crises, war. So creating the ability to launch an entirely new public service in less than a day, technologically feasible today. And of course, what this should do faster services, more iteration on services, is get our governments to the levels of user satisfaction that the best private companies can offer today, and to give us huge resource savings by really moving 95% of the manual work governments do today into an automated mode that frees up the resources to really deal with the tricky 5% that are the adaptive challenges that are really hard to wrap our head around. Now, to be a little bit more analytic about this, what we've done in the paper is we've broken down what governments do into what we call 6 sort of functional implementation layers. These are functions of government, providing public services, how the back office works, making rules, responding to crises. And then 6 enablement layers that are sort of the layers that government technologists and change managers deal with. And we're going to walk you through a few of these. So what does the agentic state mean, for instance, for user experience? Generally, citizens turn to their government in moments of stress. They've had the death of a loved one, they've just given birth to a child, they need public support in some form. And then, of course, they confront crappy UX, brittle services. Yes, we can try and redesign these as life events one by one, but the sort of top-down processes of how governments are doing that today never are going to adapt to the infinite diversity, because every person is different. But we can have an agent that goes and picks on all the public resources, brings those to you as you personally need, communicates to you in your chosen language, your chosen modality, and basically removes the entire friction of interacting with government services out of the picture to help you with your current circumstances. Or let's go to the back office. What we're seeing today is that the fastest moving companies, especially those that have been really created in the last couple of years, AI native companies, they run circles around most organizations in things like human resources, marketing, finance. They can be 10 times faster, more effective with 1/10 of the people. This kind of organizational transformation is coming to all organizations. So government should be no different. At the end of the day, most of what we do under the hood is no different between the public and the private sector. But let's also talk about some functions that are more specific to government, because UX, back office, that's all organizations. Let's talk about the regulatory state. A critical function of any modern society, because we want to have clean air and well-behaved companies and companies that pay tax, but the overhead, the administrative burden of the regulatory state is something like 3 to 5% of GDP today. Massive amounts of filling in forms, submitting data, huge compliance burden. Well, agents will allow regulatory bodies to go to companies and give them the permission to just run an agent, a certified agent, on their internal enterprise data and generate a continuous, green light, yellow light, red light, are you compliant with the rules or not? And by the way, the only information, if I'm running this agent, that I as a company have to pass back to the government is the assessment, green, yellow, red. And so all these difficult questions of how much data should a company give to the regulators, is it sensitive, what's the burden, that goes away. Or let's take something that anyone here who's ever been in the public sector really hates, which is procurement. 10 to 12% of GDP, a massive drag on efficiency, but also effectiveness in the public sector. Well, today we're seeing in the private sector, companies are starting to actually have agentic buying. And this isn't using AI to prepare your procurement. This is actually going to the AI and saying, go and find me the best offer and negotiate with the AI on behalf of the seller. And we can use agentic buying in public procurement to get better public value, better compliance with the rules, but get our procurements done in hours instead of weeks. So these are some of the ways in which, if we take the capabilities that agentic AI has today and put those to work for government, we really actually change the nature of public sector business.
Yeah, and I think you're perfectly right in saying solving public procurement in a way would lower, I think, the headache just in this room dramatically, but I think also outside of the room. We know that that's a process that's very burdensome in public administration. And yeah, what we've did with the implementation layers now, Luukas, where you just sketched, I think, the snapshot of the scenario, which is in the paper, we further outlined what I would call implementation dynamics. Right? So there are a couple of forces at play that will shape the outcome for every implementation layer. And we try to be very specific in the paper to really make it tangible of where we can move in the future. What we also did, I think what's very important, is that we sketched out what's already out there technologically, commercially working, laid this on a system of different levels of autonomy to show where are we already moving towards an agentic state. We quite deliberately took examples both from the private sector and from the public sector to really show like where do we stand with the technology and moving forward, and what can government learn from this. And then I think most importantly, every section in the white paper ends with questions, right? So I think we were also quite honest to things that we cannot answer right now. And I'm also totally honest that, I mean, in the next couple of months, next year, the technology is going to advance so quickly, right, that we continuously have to ask the questions all over again. And that's, I think, also our duty, our responsibility to do this. As said, we put them into the paper, and we'll continuously going to try to answer them. And now, as we move through the implementation layer, Luukas, can you give us some insights into what we mean with the enablement functions that you can see below?
That's right. I mean, these are functions that today a government CIO or change manager deals with, but the nature of that work is going to have to change. So governance, transparency, accountability. People worry a lot about AI governance, but this isn't just about governing the AIs. This is about how do we achieve public sector transparency using AI. I mean, one of the nice things with reasoning models is you can actually follow the reasoning trace. And we compare that to the black box of human decision making. We can actually argue that the AI will give us more accountability in public sector decisions than we have today. But there's a lot we have to get right for that to work. But let's talk about the tech stack. You know, I think over the years in TDS, we've talked a lot about digital public infrastructures, about public sector technology components. These are going to have to change to support agentic AI. Just to give you an example, identity, a crucial component of any digital government. Now today I want to know, am I interacting with Manuel, or am I interacting with the company? Are they who they claim they are? But when we bring agents into the picture, it's not going to be enough to know the identity of the agent. I'm going to need to know whom are they representing, with what kind of delegated authority, what kind of liability is Manuel taking on if I engage in a contractual negotiation with his agent. And we think that governments have a really important role to play in providing the overall infrastructure in the way they do today for identity to make that agentic identity work and actually allow all of society to use agents productively. And finally, probably the hardest part of all of this is not a technological challenge, it's a change management question, it's the people. Because as much as we talk about all the cool things that AI and agents can do, they're not going to be replacing humans lock, stock, and barrel. They're going to be complementing them, they're going to be working with humans, and it's going to be a massive challenge, especially for public sector organizations, to actually go through the cultural and organizational changes to make this possible.
Yeah, so thank you, Luukas, just for giving us a little bit of a spotlight on 3 of the enablement layers. I think for the last one, for the organization, on the people part, what that really comes down to is that public organizations as we know them, as bureaucratic organizations, in the light of Max Weber, right? This has to really be designed. I mean, the bureaucratic model of Max Weber is not anymore compatible with how we're going to build agentic organizations. And I think that explains how deep the transformation is going to go if we're going into agentic with the state. And one last remark on this, it was said earlier on the panel that building an agentic state will be the most convenient state for citizens and for business. I think that's right, but I think it's also a state that is relevant still. Because I think losing out on this opportunity and staying, I would say, static in an increasingly agentic world that will leave states increasingly irrelevant. And that's something at least that we, I think, together with all the authors, with the contributors, wouldn't allow to happen. Which is why, we spelled it out in this way. And if you consider the entire framework, I would say it can look quite complex, but I think it actually reduces complexity. Because when governments start to do pilots, you pretty much know within the framework where you are, right? And what consider and what's your context and how to move forward. And for example, if you work in one implementation layer, be it workflows, then go through in the enablement layers and get this right. So in that sense, read this framework both, I would say, in the horizontal way to know the entire spectrum of what you can do, and read it also in a vertical way to really go through the enablement layers that have to be there to make the implementation a success. And now we did a bit of talking. We're going to do more talking tomorrow. There's a workshop on the Agentic Stay here at TDS 1030, 5th floor, where we'd really like you to join us. We can go a bit more into detail because that was, right now, I think, really a fast journey through what we've done. And then also looking a bit ahead, the way we now designed this process, designed the vision paper, that was really done through collaboration. And we want to make this more continuous. So please reach out to us if you're interested in working with us on it, either by email or by the website. Contact Luukas directly, contact me directly. We really want to get the best brains together on this, from the private sector, from the public sector. And speaking about bright brains, we can now move on to the panel discussion, for which we'd be very happy to welcome you, Lauri, and you, Tiago, to join us to have a bit more of the discussion around our thinking. So, Lauri, first, belated congrats for your new role as government CIO of Estonia.
Thank you.
Can you maybe walk us a little bit through the evolution that Estonia has taken towards building agentic capability, and where you sense where you stand right now?
Mm-hmm. Well, first of all, when we are talking about the agentic state, then we are not actually describing anymore the future. In a way, in Estonia, we have been building it since 2018 or so. And if I look back at the whole vision that was already placed back in the 2000s, which many of my colleagues, if not all, shared that we are building a state, whereas I, as a citizen or entrepreneur, need to use the less time with the interaction with the government in my life. That's actually the goal. Then, when we're talking with the AI and we're talking about the agentic state, then of course our goal is still simple but ambitious, to become the nation, whereas the AI and the agents, AI is most widely and wisely used in the government services anywhere in the world. Simple as that. So we see the agentic state as the next natural evolution in the government, from digital to intelligent. Instead of people being behind the computers and wait for the service, etc., that there could be agents that act on people's behalf with full trust, consent, and transparency. That's what we should be doing. And of course, those who don't want to have it, then they have the right not to have it. But I'm sure that 80% of the people would like to lessen their time with interaction with the government. So, of course, we have this wonderful journey already with our KRAT and BROKRAT concept, the vision of a network of AIs working to serve the citizens across all channels, institutions 24/7 as one state. We have event-driven services today, over 200 of our services run with AI solutions. They are already active in public services, from different automated permits and data analysis to assistance and document writing. So in a way, of course, we are experimenting. We are not ready. That's true, but we are already scaling, and that's something very super. What I see my colleagues and companies actually doing, and that's that's outstanding. But I have to mention, in parallel, of course, we have also built and improved strong digital rights foundation. That data tracker, for instance, which allows citizens to see who uses their data, which is very important for the transparency, and then when used, let's say, very important for the transparency. Then also consent service, so people can grant or withdraw permission, on the usage of their data with one click. So this is also very important, because let's say there is no intelligent state without the trust and transparency, and this is the basic. I'm not just quoting what has been said here, but I really believe in that. So now we are moving from the AI use to AI agency. So whereas in a state where a person will have several digital agents working for them, for those who want, either it's in education, it's taxation, justice, name it, securely connected, interoperable, and also explainable. And well, just to give you some figures of the ambition, what we have, there are some calculations which have shown that if we do it by, let's say, by like this, and then we like to really build our state to be using AI and agents extensively, then we actually would aim to save 400 million euros in government operations, optimized, by adopting AI and optimized, and also hopefully to deliver new digital services in days, not in months. So that would be actually fantastic. And this is the country I would really like to to live in. And then this also gives a wonderful opportunity for our companies with the potential, again, with calculations up to 2 billion, or I hope at least 2 billion euros adding to our GDP. So I very much hope that we are also able to invest on different APIs and open APIs and agent infrastructure so that our private sector can build on top of state capabilities, creating different useful, innovative, and exportable solutions. So it's all scalable. So it's transformation is not only administrative. The transformation can be very broader. So, and of course, efficiency alone is not enough. I say that the agentic state must be also trusted and an ethical one, and which I think goes by, without saying also, but I said it. Over 80% of Estonians actually say that they want to know when they're interacting with AI. So we take it seriously. All the disclosure, explainability, and right to human review are all core principles of our design. But anyway, so what I want to say also, the agentic state, that's some kind of fright. The agentic state is not about replacing humans. It's about augmenting human capability, letting machines do the stuff that we don't want to do. And really, we should be taking our services so further that the big vision of not spending time with interaction with the government could be accomplished. And then we are not definitely waiting for this future to arrive. We are already engineering it transparently in a trusted way.
Yeah, great. Thanks for sharing that. And over to you, Tiago. First, Tiago, you're one of the leading GovTech experts in the world. You're also co-author of the vision paper, so thanks a lot for that. You also represent the World Bank here today, and the World Bank kindly endorsed and supported us in doing this vision paper, so thank you for all this. And look, I would like to ask you, because we designed the vision paper in a very universal way. So we wanted to make this fit not only for industrialized nation, for the digital leaders, but really accessible for all countries. What's your take on what's the transformation that lower and middle income countries can do towards an agentic state?
Yeah, thank you. And just to say on behalf of the World Bank that it's a pleasure to be a part of this effort, and we thank for the opportunity to support. Look, what do we see for, let's say, emerging economies, right? The opportunity from the perspective of the public sector. Agentic state sounds like a bit like a buzzword, right? But agentic state is fundamentally, it asks a question, given the current state of institutions and given the current technological affordances that we can do, how can you do more with less? I think that's a fundamental question that it tries to question. And emerging economies, they are particularly more constrained to be doing more with less, right? So that's one I would say, one opportunity that we see there for them. The other one is that if you read the agentic state, you see that it's about institutional change and to some extent moving beyond the typical Weberian bureaucracy model, right? Towards an agentic model of bureaucracy. And sometimes for good, sometimes for bad reasons, but one thing that we see is that in terms of institutional experimentation, emerging economies, they're quite flexible to start things from zero and so on. Estonia is a great example of that. In a moment of transition could rebuild the state, right, towards more efficient. But there is also not only this institutional opportunity, but there's the technological opportunity, right? So with agentic capacity, you do have capacity of doing faster prototyping instead of like having to do a procurement of like 1 million and everything fall apart for you to realize that it's what you didn't need. So you can do like faster prototyping. And the other thing is lowered upfront investments in some cases, of course, right? And another opportunity is how you can crowd in private sector innovation, right? So let me give you an example to make this very, very simple. At the World Bank, in every place where I work, we do user testing of government service platforms with citizens, but also with people from the department who did that, right? So what is the pattern that emerged? It is that if you take a civil servant or a person from the department and you ask them complete this task, they complete the task in 20 seconds, right? Just like paying taxes in Estonia, right? But if you go to the user, you test and no user are able to complete the task, right? So what happens? These are websites that work well for the government but don't work well for the citizen, right? So there, one thing that you could do, and it is a bit the direction as well that you see with Dia in Ukraine, right? It is let the agent be, so to speak, the middleman between you and an interface. Many times an interface that nobody understands, right? That no ordinary citizen can understand. And this is the large majority of particularly middle-income countries. So let that one be your intermediary, and you don't need to be yourself the state investing. Maybe private sector providers will come and be offering that as well. So we see this a little bit as an opportunity. But to get there, one thing that we at the World Bank start to think as well is to do that. First of all, you need to have, at the very basic level, user-friendly or agent-friendly front ends. And maybe making it agent-friendly costs infinitely less than fixing all the problems that you need to fix if you want to make user-friendly digital government services. So that's how we see this opportunity, and in a number of other series, but we can continue the conversation later.
Great. Thank you, Tiago.
May I comment very quickly? I love the part where you say that maybe, okay, I'm maybe twisting the words a bit, but anyway, to have an agent supporting to translate civil servants to humans. Why can't we write from the beginning like humans? But I get the point.
Yeah. Well, the idea, it actually comes from something in Brazil, because in Brazil we have what we call despachante, which essentially is a fixer who navigates bureaucracy for you to open a business, to get the license, and so on. It is a fixer, right? The idea here, it is democratize that and make everyone will have their own agentic fixer to navigate for user interfaces and complex legislation.
But I think, this also brings us to the cost of governments not acting. Because we really have two scenarios. We've got the positive scenario where government says, okay, we're going to get ahead of this trend. And either they themselves give citizens the agents, or they set up the APIs and the infrastructure so that you can come with your agent that maybe is provided by a local tech company or by Google. But you also have the situation, which I think we'll see in many countries, where they don't prepare for this, and then individuals and companies are going to start coming with their agents against government infrastructure and services that are not ready for them. So imagine you've got a government call center that today can handle 1,000 calls a day, but you're thankfully limited by the number of people who might call you and speak in Portuguese. Well, if tomorrow everyone who wants something from the government can spin up 20 different agents to call the call center and keep calling until you get what you want, you're going to have 100,000 calls a day, and those government services are just going to fall flat on their face. And so you are going to really have, the agentic society is going to come inevitably, and it's up to governments whether they meet the users where they are or get overrun by it.
Yeah. And I think that links nicely to what we said before, that for states to remain relevant, they have to go agentic, right? Because, it's happening anyway. So the question is what's your right to play in that world, and what do you do right now? Now, Luukas, I think the nice thing is that, the practical thing is that all states have this challenge, right? Which is, I think, prime for international cooperation. If you look at how cooperation worked the last 10 years in GovTech and what we need to make different to optimize this cooperation, what would be your take on that?
Well, look, frankly, governments have failed in the last generation at doing technology collaboratively. Each and every one of us sort of went into our corner and sort of figured out, well, how are we going to digitize our government, and tried and build that itself, with some common components, but mostly turning to their own IT companies with their own specifications, their own standards. And the result has been a whole bunch of reinventing the wheel, a whole bunch of wasted time. The rare examples of countries that didn't do that, Ukraine, for instance, very consciously copied elements of what Estonia did, and now Estonia is copying some of the things that Ukraine has done, saved a huge amount of time, saved years and massive costs. So for me, the hope is, and this is what we've been trying to do with the paper, is that we can start this conversation early enough that we actually harmonize before we start building, right? So that we have a similar vision of what the design patterns might look like, but then we get into more concrete cooperation, common specifications, common reference architectures. For countries that are, close by, that are good friends, let's procure these things together. Let's build the components together. We have some positive examples today. Several countries build X-Road together. So let's start building the bits and pieces of the agentic state in a collaborative manner. And instead of every one of us as governments separately sitting down with technology companies across the world, let's sit down together as common buyers. And the point there is, first of all, to accelerate this whole process, to make the horizontal learning faster, and to go from learning that itself is at the level of, panels and experience sharing, all of which is nice, to sort of actually, copy-paste machine speed learning, and then building a common infrastructure.
Very good. And maybe, Tiago, if you might add something to what can the World Bank play as a role, in strengthening this international cooperation? Because, it's an international organization, and to smooth this out and to make it viable that what Luukas sketched out actually can work, what do you think would be the optimal role of the World Bank?
Yeah, look, I think our strategic interest on this comes from two angles, right? One is the bank is one of the largest, if not the largest, funder of digital public infrastructure in low and middle income economies. And second, all of our other colleagues working, be it in education, health, and so on, in our departments at the World Bank, they're all trying to do, again, more with less, right? So for us, this is a strategic agenda, right? So the way that we are thinking about this internally, right? And I think this would be part of iterations after the launch of this paper. It is, what are the best mechanisms through which we can support this? Is this through, probably will be through our already existing instruments, but then creating requirements. So for example, from now on, if you're gonna have procurement of DPI, there will be, for instance, technical requirements that go with that to do that kind of agentic friendly, right? So that's one of these things, making requirements, bringing guidance in terms of procurement to that. And the second one, it's a bit of some regulatory policy things that we think might start to become important. One of them being context portability, right? Because if you have your citizen interacting with the state through one model, and when you move to another model, you lose all the context, the service becomes bad all over again. So the idea of citizens being able to carry their context with them, particularly to interact with the state, seems to be one of the reforms that are seeking to pursue.
Okay, great. And now back to you, Lauri. Imagine we all roll up the sleeves and say we do the agentic state in Estonia in 1 year. Accomplished. And you have the assignment to do this. What does it take? What would you need to succeed? What are the assets that have to be in place to really move forward with high pace?
It's not so alone, yeah. I don't believe that the government can work in isolation. We have to open then the government, the way of thinking as we do for even more open innovation. We have to learn more from the market. We have to take and embrace, let's say, the technology. We have to test, prototype test. We can't wait then, if 1 year, if we can't do those. There's a classical development of having 2 years of business analysis, 3 years of development, 2 years of beta, and then the life has passed. Then we need to be for, let's say, up to more agile testing and developing of our prototypes, and that comes together with the market. There is absolutely no other option, because, those who encapsulate, they start to marginalize. So being open has been always our strength, and then this should be even more expanded then.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so test, iterate, be fast.
Absolutely.
Learn from each other. Luukas, I'm going to ask you for a closing statement, combined with one question. We were, aligned today in the morning when we say like the agentic state. I mean, it's already happening. It's just unevenly distributed.
Future is always already present.
As you've done a lot of work with different governments around the globe, maybe you can pick a little bit of what already works in what kind of country first, and then I'd like to ask you to say like, after we publish the paper today, what's next? How can we accelerate this into implementation? Or as Lauri said, test.
I mean, look, what we see from the countries that have contributed this to the paper is that quite a few of them today are starting to do pilot deployments of agents. There's some interesting stuff that we're waiting to see from Brazil that I'm pretty excited about. But the one that I know the most about, besides Estonia, is Ukraine. So Ukraine has already, First Vice Prime Minister Fedorov has said Ukraine's goal is to build an agentic state. And a couple of weeks ago, we launched our first agent in DIA AI, so the first sort of very practical service. It does something very simple. It has a conversational interface that will deliver an income statement to either your Citizen app or your email. But what's interesting is in the back end, there's an MCP server. And once we validated that this one agent works, we have the interoperability framework that we can start throwing in dozens and dozens of different agents for different public services, really in no time. And so we're already, I hope, going to see in the next year that we go from one to dozens, maybe more agents. And then the really interesting question is, do we open it up to agents accessing from outside the periphery of government? So I think Ukraine is one of the countries that's going to be doing really fast piloting, but it won't be the only one. And I think the hope we have is that we can take the governments, the administrations, the people that are working, for the public good, that want to move fast, and bring ourselves together in a sort of very close-knit collaborative group so that we don't learn individually, but we actually do the learning process together. And this is really the call to action also, once again, come to our workshop tomorrow, because what we want to discuss with the collective intelligence we have here in Tallinn today and tomorrow is what can we learn from how we've done collaboration between governments, but also with industry over the last couple of decades? How can we do that better? Because what's at stake is if government is as slow in this change and as far behind enterprise as we've been for cloud, for Web 2.0, it's not just going to be a question of inefficiency, it's really going to be a question of failing at many of our public tasks. And I think what's motivating us is to not fall into that trap, to really speed up the ability of governments to adopt agentic AI. And we're excited about the potential, but there's a lot of work to do.
Great. Perfect statement to conclude. See you tomorrow at the workshop. If you want to read more about MCP servers, read the paper. Thanks for having us. It was very nice. Thank you.
Right.
Great. Thank you, Lauri. That was fun.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Oh, yeah.